Well, we are here to launch this brand new pack that is designed to help schools with their head teacher and deputy head teacher recruitment process in the Diocese of Chelmsford. Now, of course, you may not be looking forward to such an opportunity, or maybe you don't even have such an opportunity at the moment, but I would argue all the better to be aware of the resource and all the more important to be up to speed on what it may require should that opportunity arise. In fact, I want to start with a favourite quote of mine from the entrepreneur Richard Branson. He speaks of training people well enough so that they can leave for other appointments elsewhere and treat them well enough so that they don't want to leave. I think it sets an important principle in place when it comes to how we treat our staff, and especially our senior staff. Are we enabling them so that their career can develop? Are we encouraging them and training them and giving them training opportunities so that they can lead in our school but potentially lead in schools elsewhere? You will know that today the government have launched its white paper. You may not have read it, you may just have seen news reports of it or didn't even know it was happening. I've scanned through it. I can't find much about school leadership, though they do seem to have a commitment to training of teachers in addition to what is already happening. They're talking about 500,000 teacher training and development opportunities. But regardless of the white paper, and indeed even if they had there was a paragraph about school leaders, let's be certain that if we don't train and support our school leaders in their development as well as their well-being and in their responsibilities, then we are doing a disservice to the children in the school and indeed the staff themselves. And so I would say our responsibility as schools is to create more leaders. We are part of the leadership of schools as governors. And therefore, as one leadership guru puts it, we should be constantly on the lookout for how we can develop people within our school contexts to create more leaders. But come the day when there's a need to appoint a head or a deputy head or other senior leaders like assistant head teachers or heads of school in some contexts, let's be certain that the most strategic activity of any governing body at any time is to appoint appropriate leaders to the role. It's the make or break of a school. Schools change for the better or for the worse because of the leaders we appoint. However much responsibility we can take, however much accountability we put in place, whatever Ofsted or SIAMS does for our schools, it is the leader that matters and how they lead their team and how they develop their school. Now, I don't know about you, but I guess all of us would not claim to be experts in leadership. Leadership in whatever field we're in is a journey. We're all learning about leadership. And so learning about leadership in our schools is an ongoing, continuous task. Understanding the people, the practice, what's out there to support them, enable them, and in every way having leadership, the leaders of our schools, very much at the top of our agenda as we seek to do the best for the children in our schools. I take a verse from Colossians chapter 4 as a great motivation to all of us in work, all of us in our roles, and of course for those who lead our schools. We want people who will work at it with all their heart as working for God. This is a church school. These are church schools. Therefore, the place and importance of God in the context is second to none. So we need to be people who are looking out and supporting people both in their educational knowledge, their professional knowledge, in their leadership skills, but also in their understanding of what it means to lead a church school, and perhaps in their own faith journey as they are the key person in how the school develops and how school is distinctively Christian. Now, just to highlight some facts which I hope you're aware of. The first is that in a voluntary aided school, the governance board is the employer, and therefore this process of appointing a head teacher or a deputy head teacher is extremely important. It's important in any school, but they are the employer, and so you take that responsibility. In a VC school, the governance board acts as the employer on behalf of the local authority. So there is a slight distinction there, and it's important to recognise that you're not in this alone. You're not in either case in it alone, but you are in a VC school acting on behalf of the local authority at this stage, for they are the actual employer. In a multi-academy trust, and therefore in an academy, the trust board is the employer, the trust is the employer, and therefore the responsibility for the employment of head teacher and usually deputy head teachers is undertaken by directors or trustees of the trust board. However, they will usually involve local governance, particularly the chair, in that process. I can't be definitive about how that works in any one trust because trusts tend to operate in slightly different ways. What I do want to say this afternoon, and what the document that you're going to look at it highlights, is the fact that both the diocese and the local authority act and must act or should act as the advisors on any panel that is appointing a head teacher, and preferably the panel for a local authority, no matter whether a panel for a multi-academy trust. No matter whether you're VA, VC or a MAT, your church school is part of the family of schools within the diocese, and it is extremely important to involve the diocese at the earliest stage in the process, and indeed the local authority. And there are many reasons for that, but the most significant, I would suggest, is that the local authority and the diocese carry a certain amount of intelligence, knowledge about people in that local authority or that diocese, and are able to advise on that basis. They also have a lot of experience in the appointment of school leaders, and should therefore be taken seriously in the process right from the outset to the appointment of that person or persons. What I have to say though is they don't have any authority to impose their views. They are there to advise. However, it would be unwise not to take notice of that advice. And there are times, very extreme cases, where both advisors may reach the point where their advice is not being taken, and that will be taken very seriously by the local authority itself and indeed the diocese. We're there to help you get the right and best person for the role. Another bit of fact stuff that is important to note is that if a deputy head is going to resign, as with other teachers, there are 3 specific places or times in the year when they can resign with giving a term's notice. But a head teacher, there's a little less or different dates to take notice of, so that it's absolutely possible to replace through a proper appointments process for a new term, preferably the beginning of the school year, but that doesn't always work out. So it's important to keep to those dates. And can I also add to that where you may be inclined to look at an internal appointment, that internal appointment must go through a proper process of advertising and of interview. It is only right for the person being appointed that it's been a robust, correct process, but through HR, for HR reasons, it is very important to follow that rule of thumb. Now, as church schools, we work within the school vision, but also the Church of England vision for education. And it is important to have that vision very much in mind as you begin the process of appointing a new person to either deputy or head teacher role. To look at the future and see what is it your goal, what is your goal, what are you aiming for, what are you hoping for your school within this vision of being deeply Christian and serving the common good. And whilst it's possible for people who don't share a Christian faith to lead in this context, and there are many examples who do, the first look ought to be seeking to find someone who has the faith and the ability, the learning, if you like, to follow this vision through. Having said that, it's always the best person for the job based on all of the facts that become clear during the appointments process. But have in mind that it's much easier, it's much more important, much more possible to fulfill the vision, to lead collective worship, to be the kind of Christian leader if you share in the faith that the school is marked by. Those are things to bear in mind in the process as rules of thumb. There's another reason why having the vision at the heart of what you do is because, as Simon Sinek puts it, the why is more important than the how or the what. Here's his definition: that leaders and organisations with the capacity to inspire all think, act and communicate from the inside out. They start with their why. And our school vision and the Church of England vision is that why. Why are we here? What are we aiming for? What's the purpose? How are we seeking to develop? And if we start from that perspective and move through the others of how and what's, the education, skill, the training, the experience and so on, all of those things are important, but starting with the why. Why does this person have a vision for leading your school? What is their vision for leading your school? Does it fit the vision of the Church of England? Is it slightly skew whiff from that? Finding why is absolutely key to all of that. And one of the reasons for that is that our schools stand for developing and maintaining a distinctively Christian education. And what this quote says is that doesn't start with the school ethos. It's very much involved in what the school is, but with the person themselves. And teasing out in the process of appointing a head or a deputy how they themselves, not simple straight off the page answers, but how they themselves from heart and head can see their role in maintaining and developing not just the religious character of the school, but the distinctively Christian nature of that school. And this other quote, I think, makes it clear that whilst we appoint the right person with that understanding and that heartfelt understanding, it is God who is at work in our schools. And I don't know whether you share that thought, but in my view, it is the fact that our schools are church schools, Church of England schools, and our expectation is that God will work decisively, irresistibly to fulfill his promises. But he uses people, and people who are committed to such an idea. Now, all of this is summed up in the statutory inspection of Anglican schools, a SIAMS inspection. It's not the reason for doing all this, but the SIAMS inspection will be food for thought as we plan how to recruit a head teacher and what kind of head teacher we are looking to recruit. So look at a couple of statements in the leadership and management part of the SIAMS framework or schedule. How well the school has developed and implemented an inclusive and distinctive Christian vision. You may recall that essentially a SIAMS inspection looks for the evidence of the impact of your Christian vision underpinned by theological or biblical understanding, or a Bible verse as it were. And how well does the school live out that Christian vision in relationship with partners and in partnership with key stakeholders? Just those two statements out of some of the others, just highlighting them for this afternoon's purpose, shows us the importance of appointing the right person, I would say, with the right head and heart, experience and understanding, and will and vision for the future of your school. So it's no mean task, as I'm sure you're very much aware, and I hope my introductory remarks are just valuable and helpful in some ways to set the scene for looking at this new resource that we're making available from today. So let me move now to our website. So you'll be able to find this on the website under For Governors and Headteacher Recruitment, and all of the material is there. There are some additional tweaks that will happen over the next few days, but essentially it is all there. It's a little bit of an introduction, and then it's possible here to download the actual recruitment pack, not all the resources that go with it, but the pack itself. And as you can see, it's a printout of content, and quite a number of pages that go through the entire process from preparing right through to what happens on the day of the interview. So do download that first, if you, especially if you're in the kind of position where you're needing to start a process, because it will guide you through in all ways. So there's let's go just down here, talking about preparing and the fact that it's essential or important to review staffing as part of the process, and recognizing that the recruitment process can last typically 6 to 10 weeks. This can't be done in a rush. We need to go through the process. When you get to the formal interview process, it usually involves 1 or occasionally 2 days of activities, and the governor's panel appointed by the governing board should be prepared to commit to these full days. And as I mentioned earlier, do ensure that both the advisors from the diocese and the local authority are involved and consulted on available dates in order to make those all of the stages, and particularly the 2 days of the interviews, available. It makes the point there that we have no veto over a governor's decision, but you are required to take into full and proper account advice that is being given to them. And then that sort of serious point that if you make appointments contrary to advice offered, correspondence may follow from the diocese or local authority. So you enter into a period which is slightly awkward, I suppose you might say. We encourage you to think about prayer for the process, and we provide even a suggested prayer for collective worship to involve children in the prayer for the process, which they are almost certainly going to be aware of. I'm not going to go through the rest of the documents. It's come now to leadership qualifications and so on, but you may want to pick up on this. There's the sort of process in outline form, and then there's detail that goes with it. And then if I go back to the web page, On here, under model documentation, we've provided a whole range of things that will enable you to follow through the process in the pack. So there are some advertisements for different kinds of schools. There are some job descriptions for maintained schools. We haven't provided a job description for multi-academy trusts because they will usually have their own HR advice and most likely will have a model policy or model job description that they use. Then there's some model person specifications that kind of go with the model job descriptions. These are not to be downloaded and used as is. They provide a starting point for discussion, which will depend upon your context and your vision and your requirements. So and where the school is at in terms of its effectiveness. Then there are some timetables which give you different ways for different numbers of candidates for how you would run the interview process. We've not gone any more than 4 candidates, but very occasionally schools may have more applicants and shortlist more than 4, but you can adapt the timetables as indeed you would with any of these yourself. Some tasks, suggested tasks for potential or candidates to undertake when in school for the process, and then series of interview questions. Please don't download the interview question and just use them all. Pick out the ones which are particularly appropriate, and if you need support on that, you will have support for that from the 2 advisors. Usually for a church school, the potential head teacher or even deputy head teacher will be expected to conduct collective worship. You'll be able to test their or see their how they handle children and what their content is like and so on and so forth. So there's an observation record sheet that you may or may not want to use there. As I mentioned earlier, Appendix A to the prayers. And Appendix 9, which looks a bit out of place, so I may have it pushed up a bit, but it's how to shortlist grid, so that you can, when you do the shortlisting as to who you're going to interview, you go through a process using the grid. So that's our new pack. It's completely updated from anything you may have seen before, and is, as I said, now, as you can see, now available on the website to use at the time you need it. Please keep aware of that. Pass that information on to other governors, particularly if you have a personnel or staffing committee. Ensure your head teacher and deputy head teacher know it's there, both for their own professional development, but also if they're involved. Obviously, head teacher will only be involved in the deputy's appointment, neither will be involved in the head teacher's appointment. So there is our new pack. We hope and pray that it will be a particular value to our schools in the diocese as they face this all-important opportunity to appoint new people to posts within their school.